Hello everybody, welcome to my Urban Legends and Trivia channel from here in sunny, beautiful Yorktown, Virginia, January 15th, 2023. It's a Sunday, and I turned 60 this week, yes. I guess I should be happier, but I should be thankful, right? So, anyway, now I know what you're thinking from the title. A lot of you are thinking, wait a minute, Jack Nicklaus, Frasier Crane, Alex Trebek, we love those three guys, right? And most people do, but did you know that it didn't always start out that way? Now I'm older and I've seen this progression happen, and indeed they were all three hated at first. I'm going to go over them one by one. So first of all, Jack Nicklaus. Now, Jack Nicklaus had the great misfortune of following after one Arnold Palmer. Yes, Arnie's Army, Arnie Mania. And my grandfather, who was into golf, and this is my late grandfather, my late mom's dad, he's told me that Arnold Palmer rivaled the Beatles. He said it was just huge, just mania wherever you went, and hero worship. And to top it off, Arnold Palmer not only was a great golfer, won 4 Masters tournaments every other year, I think. And but he was handsome. He had the movie star handsome looks. He had the swashbuckling style. He'd hitch up his pants and he'd just grip it, right? And that kind of was different than a lot of golfers who were conservative and played the percentages, especially back in the 50s. That was a different time. It wasn't the MTV X Games generation, and here he comes along. And so he came along, and then now Jack Nicklaus came along in the 60s, and people, they hated him. They absolutely hated him because he started beating Arnold Palmer, and Arnold Palmer even made a sarcastic comment. He was funny too. And he said, well, you wouldn't do so if you didn't have those 60-inch thighs. And Jack Nicklaus, literally, they measured his thighs. They were just huge. That's where he got all his power from. And a lot of people don't know this, but Jack Nicklaus, his nickname was Fat Jack. That wasn't very complimentary back in those days, and they weren't politically correct back then. So it was mean. It was a mean nickname. And he had the dark glasses too, and a crew cut. So here he was, a total contrast to Arnold Palmer. The handsome looks. And Jack Nicklaus was a bit of a freak too, like Babe Ruth, athletically. I bet you didn't know this. He ran, I believe, a 10.500 meters. Yeah, I mean, he was fast. He ran on the track team, played basketball. So he was a little bit of an athletic wonder, and you wouldn't want to get in front of him running down that track with that size. But anyway, Jack Nicklaus that you know of in the 1970s, the pictures, he had the cool look with the shaggy blonde hair, the sideburns, the golden bear, him and Johnny Miller modeled the clothes, right? That was until the 70s. So the 1960s, Jack Nicklaus was indeed hated, and he didn't really have a lot of personality back then. He was a little more on the shy side. But then later, as he got older, he developed a personality. And when did he become popular and beloved? It wasn't until 1986, and that was around when he was 40, and he won the 1986 Masters, and that changed everything. And after that, that's when you know him today as being that beloved Jack Nicklaus. And his wife, Barbara Nicklaus, helped with that because she was sort of the matriarch of the family, still is, even to this day. And she was very popular, and that kind of softened his image. And that's where you know Jack Nicklaus today. But it wasn't literally for over 20 years. He did not become really popular, for 10 years to the 70s, and then over 20 years to 1986. Okay, now on to Frasier Crane. You're thinking, John, Frasier Crane, we love that guy, right? No. Now, if you go back and watch, and you can find this clip on YouTube of the first time that Frasier Crane was on Cheers, and he was a little scary. And I remember watching that night that he came on. And Diane actually, remember Diane Chambers actually was engaged to be married to Frasier, not just Sam. And Frasier came out, all of a sudden goes, he was kind of in a crowd there in Cheers in that episode. Like I said, you can watch the clip. And all of a sudden he pops out of nowhere and he goes, Sam, I'm Frasier Crane. And he kind of was scary, and he was a psychiatrist, and people like, what is he going to do? Is he going to take Sam and have to take Sam for mental counseling? I mean, we were all scared. We were all scared of him, really. And he was very sarcastic and dark, and we didn't like him. We hated him. We absolutely hated him. And that went on for about 2 years, and that was 1984. And when did that change? 1986, not for 2 years. And when did it change? When Lilith came on. And Lilith Crane came on the show. And she was even scarier than Frasier. And suddenly, the expression everything is relative? Suddenly, Frasier didn't seem so bad and dark. Lilith seemed dark. And Frasier seemed a little bit lighter and funny. And now, of course, Frasier also had that wit. And he started to shine 2 years later in 1986. And then Diane Chambers, the timing was already good too because Diane Chambers left. And Rebecca Howe came on the show and replaced her. And it was a very awkward time. And so Frasier and Lilith, the timing couldn't have been better. And they filled that void for a while there was that transition. So Frasier Crane indeed was hated for 2 years really, and then Lilith kind of changed all that. Okay, now the last one, Alex Trebek, and you're probably thinking, no way, no, Alex Trebek wasn't hated. He was hated for a long time, and here's why. Now Alex hosted Jeopardy for over 30 years, but see, for those of us older, we think of the original Jeopardy host as being Art Fleming, and he hosted the original incarnation for over 10 years. And Art Fleming was loved. People loved Art Fleming. That was in the 70s, but Art Fleming, how will I describe him? He was Mr. 50s. That would be sit down here, my back. Art Fleming was Mr. 50s. He just looked right out of the 50s. He was a football player, big, tall guy, the short hair. He was very conservative. The show was very conservative and the original Jeopardy was very 50s, even though it was in the 70s. And when the new show came along, I believe also 1984, right? Just like Frasier. Get this, Alex Trebek was not offered the job. Guess who was offered the job, the new job? Art Fleming. Okay, but here's the thing. Art Fleming turned down the show. He felt the new show was too hip and cool and jazzed up and dumbed down. He wanted the old show with the really hard questions. And he said no. And who did he recommend and give the blessing to? His buddy, Alex Trebek. Yes, they were friends. So that's what happened. And by the way, sadly, both Art Fleming and Alex Trebek died of pancreatic cancer. So Alex Trebek gave the blessing, but when the new show came on in '84, it was so fast. If you go back and watch those original shows, it was so fast paced, and Alex Trebek had the big curly hair, and he was cocky and fast and hip and cool, and people didn't like it. He was totally the opposite of Art Fleming. And I got to tell you, really, for about 10 years, he was not popular. From about 1984 to 1994, he was not popular. And then from 94 to 2004, the next 10 years, his second 10 years, he started to become, people started to warm up to him. He was kind of 90s, and he slowed the show down some. And then his third 10 years, that last 10 years, from the 90s into the 2000s, he became loved. He became that beloved, along with Pat Sajak, who, by the way, Pat Sajak actually even he started before Alex Trebek and usually beat Alex Trebek in the ratings. So really, Alex Trebek did not become equal to Pat Sajak till after 20 years. So there you go. So it's funny how things change over time, and I'm sure this will happen for a lot of. Another example I can give right from Jeopardy. Ken Jennings is called the GOAT now. Ken Jennings was known as the guy who couldn't beat Brad Rutter for 20 years. For 20 years, Brad Rutter was known as the king of Jeopardy. And then Brad Rutter had a horrible, he started not doing so good after his appearance against Watson. And then he had a horrible GOAT tournament. And suddenly it all flipped. It's kind of like the American Revolution when here in Yorktown, Virginia, we defeated the British and the world turned upside down, right? That's even the song they play. And really, Brad Rutter, the world was turned upside down, and now it's all different for him. And then James was that other element. So anyway, that's it. It's amazing how things change over time, and as you get older, you're going to have that happen as well. Things that you perceive as one way, right? Perception and reality, right, will change over time for you as well. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little talk. and we saw 3 people that were hated go to 3 people that were absolutely loved. And see you for the next video. Goodbye.